Welcome to the Jury Box Show with me, Melissa Peace Tomeno, attorney at law. Court is in session. All rise for the jury. Now let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Jury Box Show with me, Melissa Peace Tomeno, attorney at law. And as promised, today we're going to be diving back into the complaint that was filed against Vince McMahon, the WWE, and some other defendants. And we're going to be picking up with the factual allegations. The last time, in episode 1, we discussed the introduction to the complaint, which was an incredibly detailed introduction. But now, the factual allegations are going to go into even more detail. And the beginning of it, you're going to see, is going to do a lot of work trying to tie together Vince McMahon's actions, his alleged grooming, and Janelle Grant's job at the WWE, specifically why she believed that her job was directly linked to her agreeing to perform or agreeing to engage in these sexual acts with Vince McMahon, allegedly, and some of the other people who are mentioned in the complaint. On that note, I do want to mention again, because it is so important, that everything in the complaint is alleged. That means that nothing has been proven as a fact. These are all allegations. That is why you have the ability to litigate. That is when you bring out the information and then you try to determine what is true and what's not true. Here, we don't have, at least to my knowledge, Vince McMahon's response formally to the complaint. However, I do believe that at least within the WWE, he did vigorously deny the allegations. So keep that in mind as we go through. And also, none of this is legal advice, obviously. It's just for entertainment and informational purposes. But let's get into it. Factual allegations. Ms. Grant's history with McMahon, Laurinaitis, and WWE. And before we start, I just want to remind everybody that, at least from my perspective, the complaint is going to spend a lot of time detailing that her employment at WWE and with Vince McMahon was tied to the requested sexual acts, the ways that she was allegedly Ms. Grant, the plaintiff, asked to do. So that's important because I would think that as the plaintiff here, we want to keep a lot of focus not only on Vince McMahon, who, remember, there is an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, that was signed by Vince McMahon and Janelle Grant. But to keep focus also on the WWE so that they are going to have enough liability to not only keep them in the case, but potentially succeed in a claim against them. So, Part A. Ms. Grant's introduction to McMahon turns into a 2-hour meeting between a potential entry-level employee and a billionaire CEO. I want to point out here real fast that they do a great job, and by they I mean the plaintiff's attorney. They do a great job shedding light on how strange the employment process went for her and why it was different and why it wasn't sort of standard operating procedure for the WWE. Prior to having any involvement with WWE, Ms. Grant was dealing with profound grief following the loss of her parents, whom she cared for full-time as their sole caretaker. After her family passed away, Ms. Grant dedicated herself to finding gainful employment. During this time, Ms. Grant often ran into McMahon's 2 personal assistants in her building, one of whom was a former grade school classmate of Ms. Grant. And remember, at this time, the plaintiff here, Janelle Grant, was living in the same building as Vince McMahon. Ms. Grant's closest friend in the building was the resident manager. This individual is referred to here as resident manager. They don't give this person's actual name. Similar in personality, Ms. Grant and resident manager bonded over stories of adversity as they coordinated community initiatives in the building together. Resident manager was aware of Ms. Grant's efforts to obtain employment. In March 2019, Ms. Grant remained unsuccessful in securing long-term employment. Resident manager offered to help Ms. Grant, suggesting she could reach out to Defendant McMahon in case he could assist, and texted him to see if he would be willing to speak with Ms. Grant to provide advice about employment. So far, everything seems to be normal. McMahon responded enthusiastically and proposed times to meet with Ms. Grant to discuss employment. Resident manager passed along Ms. Grant's resume to McMahon ahead of the prospective meeting. Ahead of the meeting, resident manager advised Ms. Grant to be energetic, as McMahon is big on energy, and to talk to McMahon no differently than she talks to resident manager. On or about March 23, 2019, Ms. Grant arrived for the meeting in McMahon's condo with additional printed copies of her resume, a black notepad, and thank you cookies. I guess it's a little strange that they're meeting at his condo, but maybe not if you live in the same building. I guess in that case, it's just convenient. Sitting at his dining table, McMahon looked at Ms. Grant's resume and complimented both her communication skills and common sense before discussing little but their personal lives. For example, Ms. Grant told McMahon about the hardship that led to resident manager's offer to help and described losing her parents, her family's bankruptcy, and other trauma that led her to seek financial independence to ensure she would never experience losing her home again. A lot of these details were already discussed in the introduction, but a lot more broadly. So you're going to see that the factual allegations section that we're going through right now gives a lot more detail and context to the situation and the claims. McMahon shared stories about his upbringing, his traumatic childhood, growing up in poverty, and current family dynamics, including his separation from Linda McMahon, described as his ex and long gone. He added his marital status is an arrangement on paper for business purpose, and that he lives a quiet, isolated existence outside of the WWE. I don't really know that much about the WWE, but why do I feel like this man did not live a quiet existence in any situation or manner? At the end of the meeting, McMahon told Ms. Grant that he didn't just want to give her a job, but give her a life, and that he would find a place for her at WWE. Stunned, Ms. Grant said that she didn't know how to thank him for possibly just changing my life. McMahon responded that one simple thank you is enough, and that he'd accept a hug. They stood and embraced. Is that a red flag? Should we ring the red flag bell for that? I feel like we should. Creepy hugs always are going to get a red flag alert. McMahon then told Ms. Grant that he'd get the ball rolling on the next steps, but it was a busy time of the year as WWE prepared for WrestleMania, explaining that it was WWE's Super Bowl. He then invited Ms. Grant to attend as his guest, along with resident manager, and added that he would personally select their seats to have the best possible experience. McMahon advised her that his office would reach out to her to set up a meeting with a trusted official, WWE Corporate Officer Number 2 at WWE headquarters. Now, at this point, the WWE Corporate Officer Number 2 is unnamed. We don't know if they're a male or a female. They're just Corporate Officer Number 2. After asking if her cell was the best number to reach her, McMahon shared his personal phone number with Ms. Grant, walked her to his door, and hugged her while whispering, "So good." Section B. McMahon arranges for Ms. Grant to be hired by WWE while beginning to groom her for sexual exploitation. On March 31st, 2019, the day before Ms. Grant was scheduled to meet with WWE Corporate Officer Number 2, can we just say Corporate Officer Number 2, though, just for our purposes? That's a mouthful. McMahon unexpectedly invited Ms. Grant to come back to his condo for pointers for her meeting with for Corporate Officer Number 2. When she arrived, McMahon gave her a huge embrace and suggested they sit on the couch. It quickly became clear that McMahon had no intention of giving her pointers for an interview, except for a single direction. If the topic comes up during their meeting, Ms. Grant could state they met through a mutual friend. They did, didn't they? Why would he have to tell her that? They literally, that is how they met. Is it possible that this man just maybe lies a lot, so he is just constantly trying to come up with a game plan? I don't know. That's an interesting thing. They literally did meet through a friend. During this meeting, McMahon described a surgery he had on his knee by touching Ms. Grant's leg and drawing a line where the surgery had taken place with his finger. He stated that similar to rehabbing an injury, and this is very Dr. Phil of Vince, Ms. Grant cannot let scar tissue build up inside her from trauma, as her vulnerability is a gift. That's cute. McMahon explained that people are intimidated around him and are afraid to touch him. Vince, you're giving out a lot of creepy hugs, so why are you surprised? Allegedly. McMahon added that he is an affectionate person who likes to hug and starves for physical affection. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. McMahon then led Ms. Grant on a tour of his condo before hugging her goodbye. Again, whispering, feels so good. It seems so creepy. On April 1st, 2019, Ms. Grant met with corporate officer number 2 at WWE headquarters for a short time. WWE corporate officer number 2 hardly asked any questions, saying that he was figuring out where Ms. Grant could be placed and then promised to be in touch again after WrestleMania. Later that day, Ms. Grant texted McMahon and enthusiastically described her meeting with the corporate officer. She also commented on a dinosaur skull that she saw on McMahon's office wall, prompting his response. By the BTW, if you're a bad girl, the T-Rex will eat you. Followed by, seriously, Janelle, wherever you land in WWE, you will be a credit to the organization. On April 7, 2019, Ms. Grant and former resident manager were provided a VIP experience at WrestleMania, including private transportation in a black SUV arranged by McMahon. Per McMahon's instructions, Ms. Grant diligently took notes about her impressions from WrestleMania, her first time attending such an event. Ms. Grant left overwhelmed with emotion and feeling hopeful that everything McMahon promised was becoming a reality. Over the next several weeks, McMahon invited Ms. Grant to his condo on several occasions, each time assuring her that he would find the right position for her at WWE. For each meeting with McMahon, Ms. Grant bought sample job descriptions that she found online to review with him and demonstrate the types of roles that she might fit in. McMahon listened to Ms. Grant, asked her questions, and pointed out qualities that he described as rare gifts, including her goodness, vivaciousness, childlike innocence, and ability to be vulnerable, all things that made her an easy target. McMahon also initiated long physical embraces with Ms. Grant, repeatedly telling her that he trusted her and that he could be himself around her, and how he'd opened up his home to her. I mean, what a guy. During one visit to the condo in late April 2019, McMahon did not greet Ms. Grant when she entered, but instead called her to his master walk-in closet. As soon as she turned the corner, McMahon emerged from his bathroom wearing only briefs. Shocked, Ms. Grant turned around and apologized, as McMahon laughed and asked her to turn around. Gee golly. He then handed her a shirt and asked for help with the buttons. McMahon reminded her that he was working hard on her role and said he felt good about her taking care of him. But Vince, why did you need help buttoning your shirt? What's going on? Around that time, McMahon also told Ms. Grant that he would never forget how helpless she looked when they first met, and he wanted to wrap his arms around her and assured her that everything is going to be okay, and that Ms. Grant's problems were in the past. McMahon also told Ms. Grant that he viewed her as a true friend. However, McMahon advised Ms. Grant that people at WWE could never know about their closeness, or else rumors would spread and threaten them, particularly due to Ms. Grant's physical beauty. McMahon also emphasized that the circumstances could jeopardize the company. Around this time, he mentioned that he had an attorney on speed dial who he described as the best of the best at making problems, including people who become problems, go away. On April 21st, 2019, McMahon unexpectedly invited Ms. Grant to his condo to provide her with an update. Upon her arrival, McMahon assured her, Ms. Grant, that he was a man of his word and that his office would be in touch with her soon with the right role. As she turned to leave, McMahon grabbed a large black electric massager and told Ms. Grant to turn around for a demonstration. He quickly moved to rubbing his hands on Ms. Grant's upper back before reminding her that she would hear from his office about the next steps in a day or two. 2 days later, Ms. Grant was contacted about further meetings at WWE. A week later, she met with 2 high-ranking human resource employees. They don't give their names, but Human Resource Employee 1 and 2. Both of the human resource employees provided Ms. Grant with their impressions about the company culture at WWE and confirmed that the ball was in their court to figure out where she would best fit in at the company. On May 5th, 2019, Ms. Grant visited McMahon's condo again, and the topic of bucket lists came up. Okay. During which, Ms. Grant expressed that she always dreamed of attending the Belmont Stakes. McMahon responded that he would personally acquire 2 tickets for her. McMahon then stood up from his chair and knelt in front of the chair where Ms. Grant was seated, blocking her from standing. He leaned close to Ms. Grant and told her to kiss him. Ms. Grant paused and gave McMahon a kiss on the cheek, to which McMahon sighed. "That's not what I meant." Duh. After McMahon walked off to his bedroom and said that he wanted Miss Grant, she swiftly rejected his advances and tried to reason with him that he was putting her in a bad position. Miss Grant pled with McMahon to stop and think about what he was doing. McMahon then begged repeatedly to simply hold Ms. Grant. Out of fear for her employment and his earlier implied threats about his legal team dealing with problems, Ms. Grant lay down in the bed next to McMahon and kept her hands clasped and ankles crossed as she acquiesced in saying that he could only hold her but nothing more. I want to quickly talk about that. That's another way that the plaintiff here is trying to show that she felt threatened, that she felt that her job, her security, her financial stability was directly tied to her acquiescing to Vince McMahon's demands, or whatever it is, his request to hold her. So again, that's important because this is a complaint. This is a lawsuit. This is all leading up to the actual causes of action. So you're going to see that a lot as we go on, especially in this next section. The plaintiff is always tying it back to her job and her fear and why she was doing this, not because she wanted to, not because she was necessarily consenting, but that she felt to in order to keep her job at the WWE. When Ms. Grant tried to make small talk about WWE's TV storylines, McMahon suggested she watch the next episode of Monday Night Raw and text him before the broadcast. After she agreed, he forcibly kissed her and began pulling down a strap on her sweater. Ms. Grant then sat up and said she needed to leave and had a lot to process. Next day, Ms. Grant watched the show as promised and texted McMahon to wish him well. She was shocked when he appeared on the show and texted back in the middle of the live broadcast. "That was a very nice message. Made me smile." On May 9th, 2019, McMahon texted Ms. Grant that she will have a job at WWE by that Friday. The next day, Human Resources employee called Ms. Grant to inform her that the corporate officer would contact her at 4 p.m. on the dot to discuss a legal role. After her call with WWE corporate officer, Ms. Grant sent McMahon a thumbs-up text message to indicate that the call went well. Around 7 p.m., WWE corporate officer number 4 unexpectedly called her a second time and formally offered her a job, saying, "Welcome to the WWE." On May 11th, 2019, McMahon invited Ms. Grant to his condo again and asked her to lay in bed with him before informing her that he had ordered WWE corporate officer to offer her the job, even though a job description had not been firmed up beyond a high-level summary. So that is very relevant here. He's giving her a job that doesn't even exist. And he ordered this person to do it. Why is that odd? Because the plaintiff here is showing that she was given special treatment as part, or at least I believe they're trying to show that she was getting this special treatment as part of the grooming effort that they're going to continue to talk about here. While incredibly excited to finally receive long-awaited employment and financial security, Ms. Grant expressed to McMahon that there seemed to be a conflict between his doing this and his warning Ms. Grant that no one could know about their closeness. He appeared amused with this, replying, "It's my company." McMahon then undressed down to his briefs, while Ms. Grant remained clothed, and he began kissing Ms. Grant and inserting his hands into her pants without consent. On May 16, 2019, McMahon informed Ms. Grant that he had obtained 2 tickets to the Belmont Stakes, scheduled for June 8, 2019. On May 17, 2019, Ms. Grant received an offer letter from WWE for an entry-level job as a legal administrator coordinator with a salary of $75,000. On May 18, 2019, McMahon summoned Ms. Grant to his condo. It feels like nothing good happens when summoned to Vince McMahon's condos, allegedly. And she brought a printed copy of the offer letter to review with him. McMahon informed Ms. Grant that her new boss, a WWE employee who had worked in risk and government relations, was a decades-long family friend and confidant, similar in age to McMahon, and one of a small original group, what McMahon called the Titan family, who helped the WWE expand from a regional promotion to a global juggernaut. McMahon stated that outside of his attorney, this WWE employee was the most feared in the company because this employee usually fired other employees. Beyond that, he offered little detail about WWE employee number 1's role at WWE. Instead, he focused on their personal traumas, explaining that similar to Ms. Grant, WWE employee has no family left after his spouse had passed away, and that the McMahons and WWE were their surrogate family. McMahon touted WWE employees' loyalty, saying that this employee would be able to protect Ms. Grant, and then led her to his bedroom while giving her the command of, "Please don't stop this." At least as alleged in this complaint, their conversations always seem to be twofold. The job, how he's going to help her, and then what he needs to do for her sexually. Or if not so explicitly, he discusses the lack of affection that he has and how he needs it, and he touches her, allegedly without her consent. So, again, it's always twofold, but it's always sort of going back to her actual job with the company. During the May 18th, 2019 encounter, Ms. Grant felt coerced into engaging in sexual activity and that McMahon had trapped her in an impossible situation, as she feared adverse career and personal consequences and legal retaliation if she declined his advances. That isn't necessarily surprising, given that he allegedly continued to tell her how powerful he was as this amazing attorney on speed dial. It seems like, if he wants to, he could ruin someone's life. McMahon stated, "This is what I have been waiting for," as he performed oral sex on Ms. Grant. Ms. Grant asked that protection be used, and McMahon responded that there was no need to worry because he was clean. Feeling that she was being used for his gratification, Ms. Grant went numb and was unable to make eye contact. McMahon then flipped on his back and said, "Okay, jack 'em off." Ugh. I'm sorry, but literally, how else was I supposed to have read that? Disturbed by the non-consensual sexual encounter, she hoped that McMahon would cease his advances. But his advances continued and left her to fulfill his demands or lose her job. On June 16th, 2019, the day before starting with WWE, Ms. Grant attempted to shut down any further physical contact or sexual encounters by admitting to McMahon her unhappiness and concern, starting her first job ever, in his legal department no less, while in a physical relationship with the chairman and CEO. Smart girl. She requested that they end any physical relationship while remaining friends to avoid risks to either of them. I wonder if he agreed. Let's see. McMahon refused, saying that it was not ending, it did not need to, and that he did not ever envision it ending. He reminded her that he trusted her, reiterated that rumors lead to trouble, probed whether her silence would be an issue, and brushed off her concerns that she was struggling with the feeling that her job felt unearned. McMahon told Ms. Grant that all she needed to do was not tell anyone, and that it just has to look legit. McMahon then spun the conversation and told Ms. Grant to focus on the positives and embrace that her life was about to change, saying, "Isn't that what you always wanted?" McMahon manipulatively emphasized that she's about to start an adventure and gain a new family with the WWE as a surrogate for the family that she had lost. Ultimately, Ms. Grant's unsuccessful attempt to end further unwanted physical contact quickly taught her that her view on the matter was not relevant. Section C. Ms. Grant's WWE career commences. Minimal work and an absent boss. I want everyone to pay attention because here her attorneys spent a lot of time showing exactly why the other employees at the WWE should have known that something wrong was happening here involving Janelle Grant. So keep notice of that, my jurors. On June 17th, 2019, Ms. Grant reported to WWE headquarters for her first day of work. With attorneys in glass offices and support staff in cubicles with low walls and tall monitors, it was easy to see how much other colleagues worked. Quiet and small department, it was even easier to overhear their conversations. There we go. Ms. Grant was immediately surprised that there was not much work assigned to her, struggling to even appear busy in her new role. In stark contrast to colleagues who complained about overflowing inboxes, Ms. Grant's phone only overflowed with controlling and sexually charged text messages from the chairman and CEO, reminding her of both McMahon's power and ever-present surveillance. Colleagues shared onboarding stories with Ms. Grant and talked about receiving pre-made binders of information or the opportunity to shadow departing employees, none of which happened for Ms. Grant. Again, because I feel like this job was made up. The administrator coordinator, which is sort of like redundant. Nor did anyone know what her usual title of administrative coordinator meant. Well, I don't either. Ms. Grant did not even meet WWE employee number 1 until her second week of employee, which I think he or she, I should say, is Janelle's boss in the legal department. WWE employee number 1 was a lively individual who frequently regaled the legal department with stories of others at WWE. If McMahon's name was mentioned, WWE employee number 1 would turn to Ms. Grant with a smile and a finger point and or a comment that drew attention to her connection with McMahon, such as, "She knows what I'm talking about." WWE employee number 1 and Ms. Grant bonded as quickly as McMahon had predicted. Ms. Grant, referred to as partner, was taught words to live by in WWE, including, "We do what's in the best interests of the company. Protect the business. If McMahon wants something, the answer isn't no, but rather, how do we make it happen?" WWE employee number 1 also impressed upon Ms. Grant that job titles don't mean anything for members of McMahon's inner circle, which she clearly was considered to be a part of. As WWE employee was seldom in the office and required little administrative support, Ms. Grant reported indirectly to another WWE employee within the legal department. This person provided her with occasional projects related to talent appearances and XFL that helped fill Ms. Grant's time. So it seems like she's finally actually doing work. Based on her hiring alone, WWE Corporate Officer Number 4 was on notice that there was something different about Ms. Grant, namely her connection to McMahon. As Ms. Grant feared and had expressed to McMahon, she was unhappy that a spotlight was unnecessarily put on her before she ever even set foot in the office. Ms. Grant immediately noticed that WWE Corporate Officer Number 4 was warm with other colleagues but cold towards her. Beginning in July 2019, after Ms. Grant raised an issue related to XFL's performance-enhancing drug policy with McMahon, Corporate Officer Number 4's behavior shifted from cold to actively hostile. If Ms. Grant walked into a room while Corporate Officer 4 was laughing with all colleagues, Number 4's expression immediately became blank, and Number 4 would walk away. If Number 4 and Ms. Grant walked towards each other in the hallway, Number 4 stopped and changed directions. Colleagues noticed this shift in behavior, and while some commented on it to Ms. Grant, others emulated it. Notwithstanding the issues detailed above, Ms. Grant took her employment seriously. In contrast, McMahon continued a pattern of sending sexually charged messages throughout the work week. Certain her employment depended on her continued appeasement and obedience to McMahon, and believing she needed McMahon's protection from the suspicious WWE Corporate Officer Number 4 and others, Ms. Grant felt no choice but to respond in kind. From all this, Ms. Grant began experiencing debilitating panic attacks in the office on a near-daily basis that left her physically drained. She could not hide the physical symptoms of these attacks and texted resident manager, "You should see the way people look at me when I'm having an attack." But while her co-workers noticed, no one got involved. Section D. This is going to be the last section we're going to do today. We are only on page 20 of 67. Come back for part 3 because things are about to get messy, both figuratively and literally. Part D. McMahon's coercive control tactics to sexualize and dehumanize Ms. Grant. In the summer of 2019, McMahon's presence was all-consuming in Ms. Grant's life. In the office, she felt monitored as she was surrounded by allies of McMahon, which led to continued daily panic attacks. Outside the office, McMahon sexualized her entirely. He no longer referred to her as a friend and largely stopped talking to Ms. Grant outside of sexting and fantasy talk. Any non-sexual texts related to life and or work were either ignored or given token responses like okay or yup. As detailed herein, McMahon was adamant about having Ms. Grant send him explicit photographs, impressing upon her that it was part of her sexuality. Given the control that McMahon had over Ms. Grant's employment, she felt compelled to comply and sent the explicit photographs to McMahon's mobile device. Ms. Grant was routinely assured that the photographs she was providing to McMahon were to remain private and were part of their secret world. McMahon began to degrade Ms. Grant, calling her his bitch, while hinting at a fascination with having other people watch them engage in sexual activity. Additionally, this complaint details encounters during which McMahon caused Ms. Grant to sustain physical injuries, including bleeding and pain from forceful use of sex toys. Despite Ms. Grant's plea to cease any further sexual activity, the number of sexual encounters increased, as did McMahon's physical aggression during them. Notably, McMahon was most aggressive when using the certain sex toys named after male WWE wrestlers and performers. Guys, this gets allegedly a little strange. McMahon named the sex toys so that the color of the toy matched the race of the wrestler. For instance, a black dildo would be named after an African American wrestler, and a white dildo would be named after a Caucasian wrestler. I mean, I want to say, like, I applaud the equal opportunity that he's giving in terms of the sex toys as racial identities, but I don't know that the wrestlers would enjoy that, at least. I don't know. Maybe they would. In addition to McMahon's infatuation with pretending that other men, and namely certain WWE talent, were in the room with them, this was yet another incremental step in desensitizing Ms. Grant to his fantasy and eventual demands that she perform sexual acts for and or have sexual contact with others within WWE. During a David versus Goliath type wrestling match in 2019, Ms. Grant shared with McMahon her thoughts on the event, the draw of rooting for the underdog, and ideas for future events. McMahon complimented on her creative input. She believed she was being taken seriously. That is, until McMahon named a dildo after the smaller wrestler and attempted to sexualize the situation, diminishing her input. By fall of 2019, McMahon frequently pressed for pornographic videos and more explicit content. When Ms. Grant expressed apprehension with his request, McMahon responded with assurances that she could trust him, or questioned why she didn't trust him. McMahon also took care to remind Ms. Grant of his power and influence, such as by flaunting a meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince in October 2019. That is where we're going to end today. We're going to pick up next time, reviewing more of the factual allegations. And again, this goes into the nitty-gritty. There are text messages that are reproduced within the complaint that I can't even show on YouTube. They are that graphic. So buckle up and join me next time here at the Jerry Box Show, where we're going to continue on discussing the complaint filed against Vince McMahon. Until then, all rise for the jury. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you think that you have your own personal injury case, including but not limited to a motor vehicle accident, dog bite, medical malpractice, or premises liability, email me at thejuryboxshow@gmail.com for a free consultation where we can discuss possibly helping you or connecting you with someone who can.